Okay, so key points. Key point number 1 in the budgeting process, starting with forecasted revenue or income, top line.
Top line, right? Like let's be real. You can't budget if you have no idea what your annual projected revenue or income is going to be. Again, I always relate it to personal things. You don't know how much of a house you can afford or a car or even your groceries or eating out if you don't know how much money you have. And this is hard, especially if you're a new business, because you might not have anything to pull from. You might not have any historical data. And so it's super important to lean into maybe other industry experts or find some people who are in your space that you could benchmark with to get an idea of what that revenue is going to be. A lot of different ways that you can forecast it. If you are in installment business, it's a little bit harder because you're having to earn that business every day and every month.
Yes.
Not my favorite
income.
kind of rent. Not my favorite. Installment is not my favorite because it's hard to come by. But yeah, if you're installment revenue, then you got to find it all the time. And so what you're really going to want to know is how deep your funnel is. That no different than recurring. We'll get there in a second. But you're going to really want to know how deep your funnel is, what your prospect list looks like. Again, if you've been in business longer than a year, you can go back and see if there's any seasonality to your revenue and really start to chart that. I'm going to back up a second. Part of that first step is really finding a tool to use for budgeting. At Belay, when we started out, it was just an Excel or Google sheet. Yeah.
Spreadsheets for the win. Can't knock a good spreadsheet.
No. And it's simple, especially if you don't have a lot of revenue. You're not going to have a lot of expenses. And so it's easy to track. And really, link those sheets together. And so you have everything right there. If your budget's really slim, then it's just on one sheet. But find a tool that's right for you. Over time, we've graduated and we're no longer using sheets, although I do miss it. I love a good sheet. So then once you are starting to forecast that revenue, whether it's installment, like I said, you're going to want to know your funnel, know seasonality, or recurring revenue, what you can start looking at is for recurring revenue is month over month gain. I know one of the things I'm actually going to let you talk here for a second and give all the dirty details of it is when it comes to retention. That's a big part of revenue. And I know that that's something that here at Belay we follow a lot. So why don't you give us some information about that metric in and of itself, retention?
Yeah. So I love that. Thank you. Yeah. So there's a couple things, right? Like you said, like understanding your sales, net new revenue coming in the door and your projections on that and what your sales funnel, leads, marketing efforts look like to get you those new sales. And then the clients you have and keeping them. So paying attention to what percent are leaving, what is going out the door. You can't just compound new sales without paying attention to what you're losing. Every business has attrition. You should expect to have attrition, even though it stinks when you have attrition.
Right.
It's part of business. You're not going to keep every client you have forever. So we've been at Belay really maniacal about understanding what acceptable losses look like when it comes to clients leaving Belay, and really tracking that data as much, if not more than, the data for new sales coming in the business. So you have a really good understanding of the net gain, which would be the difference between what you're adding versus what you're losing, and the gain in the middle. And that's kind of what we use to forecast month over month growth percentages that lead us to our end year or future state revenue number.
Yeah, and making sure that those metrics aren't telling you the story that you just want to hear, because one of our early mistakes was taking the net gain at the end of the month, right? So you'd say, we gained 10 clients, but we lost 5, and not doing it at the beginning of the month, right?
Yes. It took us many, many years to realize the true net gain number or true retention number you want to look at is how many clients you had at the top of the month.
Right.
And using that number instead of how many you had at the end of the month.
Yes, yes, because you can start to tell yourself a story that makes things look much better than actually being truthful. So yeah, thank you. I wanted to go deep because that's important for us, especially recurring businesses out there. The metrics are going to tell the story. The metrics are going to help you forecast your revenue / income so that you can start budgeting. So again, find how your business operates and start to really forecast what it's going to look like on an annual basis. Okay, so we start there.
So you have a guess at what your revenue might be for a year, and now you need to start building in everything that falls below that, and the first step is where you want your margins at. So I know you have devised, and we use a very meticulous formula for our business, so do tell.
Yeah, I think that it's, for me, because I want us to be profitable. I know that seems so silly, but, and I'm not afraid of the numbers because I happen to really like numbers and I like money. So I take that, you start with revenues 100%. You start there. I'm not going to go out and just start spending it because what's going to happen, there's going to be a deficit. So we really, in the very early days, determined what our cost of goods percentage would be. And I'm going to jump really far to the bottom, what we wanted our net profit to be. It's kind of like that old adage that you got to pay yourself first. So your shareholders, your business owners, right? You need to know how much you can invest back in the business, how they get paid, right? Our listener question talked about, how can he increase, his salary? And so I just jump all the way down to the bottom. So there's really 3 big margins: 100% revenue. Got to focus on that, what your cost of goods are, and then what your net profit is. Based off of those numbers, that gives you all the meat in the middle that you can play with. That's when the next round of metrics come in, which is how much are you going to allow for employee burden cost? That's salaries, benefits, taxes, that all goes in there. Marketing. Marketing is super important.
It is.
Super, super important. And you have to determine what percentage you're willing to spend on marketing so that way you can gain more prospects. Nobody knows about your business. It's not if you build it, they will come. You really do have to market your business.
Marketing's a thing, for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
So determine how much you want to spend there. And if there's other things that are important in your business, like IT, maybe you're a technology business, and that's important here for Belay because we are remote. Technology is important. We can't do our jobs without technology, so we need to make sure we add that in. Also, culture is super important to us. And so we're going to make sure that we have some funds in there to have events. Being remote, we want to make sure we can get together. And so that's a pretty expensive line item. But having those margins, those percentages really start to allow us the ability, the framework to start creating that budget. And at that point, it's pretty hard to get off track.
I think, as to piggyback off what you're saying about the margins, that actually drives all of the decisions we make for our budgets and our culture and our staffing needs and our marketing spend. Right. Is if we know we project to do $1 million and we also know we're going to keep X percent for net profit, we adhere to our guidelines. And so I think that's a big one for our listeners to know. If you're agreeing that you want 10% net profit, regardless, that's what you're paying yourself as the owner, you want to walk away with whatever that number or percent is, then that will drive the decisions you make for the rest of your year. So we have conversations all the time, you and I, as COO and CEO, around, can we afford it? Our revenue's here. Are we holding our net profit number? Does it fit in the middle? Sometimes the answer is yes. We had a great month. We're trending up. We can do those things. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes we want to do things for our team or for our organization, but sometimes it falls on a wish list or a nice to have list because maintaining the margins is priority number one. And I think that could be an area where maybe people get it wrong, or they get to the end of the year and go, gosh, how did I make no money? Because they might have made decisions outside of that filter.
Yeah, and I think that if you can, especially if you're a small business owner, if you can add some sort of buffer in there, it's money's emotional. And if you're the owner of the business, you're going to feel like it's your money, right? Instead of it's the business or the organization's money. And so you may be inclined to spend a little more, or you may be inclined not to spend enough. So if you put some sort of buffer in there, even if it's just your CPA or you hire a bookkeeper, somebody to kind of just give it to you like it is without any of that emotion, because that'll help you stay within those margins. And sometimes there's some tough conversations. I mean, right now, in the economy that we're in, people are having to make some tough decisions. We as Belay did. You're going, hey, we forecasted revenue to be at a certain number. It's not. What expenses are we going to get rid of? We didn't leave those expenses in there. We're holding to our margins. And that's what makes a highly profitable business, and the one that's really, really, really focused.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that leads us to, which we teased up, budget expenses, zero-based budgeting.
Yes. All right.
Sexy.
So it is sexy. It is sexy. And I want everybody to get real familiar with zero-based budgeting if they haven't heard of it before.
Do tell.
Yes. So I know that probably a really bad example, but I'm going to use it because I think everybody can understand. This is something our government doesn't do. The reason that I say that is because our government and quite honestly, even some larger businesses, when you talk about those percentages and those margins, their revenues are so high, right? I mean, you're talking about billions of dollars that it is a lot of work to go line by line and ask departments or employees to really detail out those specific expenses. If you're a small enough business, and do this as long as you can, go to zero-based budgeting. And what that's going to do is it's going to require your leaders and your team members to come to you and say, these are the 10 things that I need to buy. What that does is that really builds accountability. If you do it the other way and you say, hey, team, you guys have $200,000 to spend this year, guess what? They're going to spend all $200,000. That's where you'll hear people go, hey, it's December. My fiscal year ends December 31st. I've got $10,000 left over. Let me buy 1,000,000 pens. Let me go to that one conference really quick. Let me prepay for something. And as a business owner, that's really not setting you up for success, because what you're doing is you're missing margin that could come to the bottom for profit and eventually help you reinvest back in your business or give yourself that raise that you've been looking for.
Yes. And even in that same scenario, what we do at Belay is our budget is our entire company's budget. So one department might have underspent because they didn't need something or something happened. And we as leaders and officers of the business are able to say, you know what, we have this need in this other area of the business that we did not anticipate. So we're actually going to move dollars from Department A to Department B who needs it, because Department A they're not just going to use the money to go buy pens. We really share and redistribute funds frequently as business changes daily, weekly, monthly, and we're looking at it frequently so we can reallocate monies to where we need them most, which leads us to our next key point.
Review. That's right. Review. Okay. So you've done all the hard work. You've forecasted where your revenue is. Outside of that, you're going to determine what your margins are, okay? And then you're going to budget. You're going to use that zero-based budgeting, so everybody's going to be accountable for their dollars. But if you don't look at it, if you don't inspect what you expect, then you're going to get to the end of the year and you're not going to have reached your goals. You're not going to have hit those metrics. I hear business owners who only look at it quarterly. That's a little hard for me to swallow. I can't imagine only looking at it quarterly. I'm no judgment. This is a no judgment zone. But somebody who has a vested interest in your business should be looking at this monthly. And of course, cash flow, which we're not even talking about here, should be looking at it weekly. So determine, depending on the volatility of your business, how often not only are you reviewing your financials, which will go into this budgeting, but how often are you allowing yourself to actually manipulate or update your budget? Now, a budget is not actuals. I'm not telling you that every month you need to go in there and go, okay, well, we didn't do that conference. Let me take that out. That can literally be like way too much work. That'll drive you crazy. But I do think that it's really good to get in there monthly and see where you're trending. Because like we said earlier, if you need to make changes based on that you're not hitting your revenue numbers, you need to bring down those expenses. Or hopefully you're exceeding your forecast, right? And you can add some stuff
dream.
in. Right.
Yes. I was going to say as
Right.
CEO, yes. I mean, I look at the financials monthly, and I can't imagine not at least looking at them monthly because they help me plan.
Right.
My job is to be able to forecast the future of Belay and to cast vision. And it's very hard to cast vision for an organization or a company or a team or your people if you don't have clarity as to where you're actually headed. So, and financials are such a huge part of an organization's growth strategy, forecasting, planning, what's going to happen in the coming months, whether you're cutting things or adding things. Being able to do that, you kind of have to know where you sit at least on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to miss out on an opportunity. I mean, I think of a marketing opportunity, right? I mean, it's lovely to think everything will be thought of a year out when you're planning your budget. But the truth is, you're going to have opportunities that arise that you didn't plan for. And if your revenue is exceeding where you planned, then let's sit down and find the money for it. And so that's why looking at the budget is so important, that you can make small tweaks along the way. I know for us right now, during this very unusual year, we're looking at it a lot more, and we're being able to say, okay, we took these things out. Here's our wish list now. Okay, things are maybe projecting, going a little bit better than we thought. Okay, let's add those back in. A forecast is for you as a business leader and as a business owner. It's a tool. It's not meant to be scary. You're not in trouble. Your parents, the principal, whatever authority figure you might have been a little afraid of when you were a kid is not coming to get you. It's not profanity. It's not a curse word. It's a great thing that you can really leverage to grow your business and help you reach those goals that you wanted to, especially if you are an entrepreneur and you had that crazy idea to leave what was good and what was safe to go start something. It's really important to watch it really closely. Hire people if you need to help you understand those numbers, but don't be afraid to look at them. They tell a story. It's a beautiful story that can really help those dreams come true. So once you decide on how to review it in the cadence, keep doing it. Don't be afraid to change it.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, this has been a ton of great information for our listeners. I think we're even giving them a great activation guide, a download of a budgeting template for you guys. So we can at least give you a framework to start if you don't have one already. And Lisa, thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge on all things budgeting for our audience today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And yes, that template is the one we started with. So it's near and dear to my heart.
And we used it for many, many years. So it's definitely not startup only. We used it for many, many years. So enjoy it.
Yes, thank you.